Of another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jean, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, May 17th, 2026 issue of the New York Times Business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Move fast and teach things. OpenAI and Khan Academy made a chat box for the classroom. What can we learn? By Josh Tiringel. So much to learn when creating a tutoring bot. The secret to integrity is saying no a lot, and that's what Sal Khan did in early 2021, the first time that the president and co-founder of OpenAI, Greg Brockman, invited him to try ChatGPT. Perhaps he might find a way to use the technology at Khan Academy, his online education empire. Back then, OpenAI was an obscure research lab, and ChatGPT-3 was an experiment that had more in common with a Roomba than a Tesla. The model would show glimmers of intelligence, then roll into a corner and headbutt itself. It did not take long for Mr. Khan to politely pass on the idea of a collaboration. OpenAI had reached out because it's hard to find anyone in public life as universally admired by the right, the left, education leaders, reformers, teachers, parents, students, as Mr. Khan. Since he founded Khan Academy as a nonprofit in 2008, it has expanded its library of thousands of video lessons and interactive exercises into dozens of subjects. Its mission is to provide a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere, and some 190 million people use the service around the world. In the United States, nearly 800 school districts use its software for instruction, training, and aligning curricula with state requirements. In all, Khan Academy's success is among the best evidence that the internet is worth all the trouble it creates, and companies often want a piece of Mr. Khan's credibility. The second time Mr. Brockman contacted Mr. Khan, he added his co-founder, Sam Altman, and the email was more cryptic. It was the summer of 2022, several months before ChatGPT 3.5 would debut and introduce much of the world to generative artificial intelligence. Mr. Khan was still skeptical, but he and his chief learning officer, Kristen DeCerbo, signed an NDA and got on a Zoom call. They became two of the only people in the world to know about the existence of GPT-4, OpenAI's next generation, with capabilities well beyond the model that hadn't even blown people's minds yet. Immediately, Mr. Khan understood he was seeing the future in the present. The model didn't just answer AP biology questions correctly, it explained how it arrived at the right and wrong answers, and it could generate new exam questions in endless iterations. Now we know later that they were not as perfect as they first appeared, Mr. Khan told me. But back then, I was just like, oh crap, this is a big deal. OpenAI planned to roll out a GPT-4 in 6 months, and Mr. Brockman wanted Khan Academy to debut its own AI product, a tutoring bot that students could use on their laptops at the same time. The call ended, and Mr. Khan had a feeling that if Khan Academy didn't adjust to the coming wave, it might be rendered obsolete. But he didn't know what to do. For all the honors bestowed upon him, Mr. Khan is not a swaggering chief executive. He's a tutor. Rather than imposing authority, he opts to explain, encourage, and nudge Khan Academy forward with patience that his colleagues describe as legendary and occasionally infuriating. Khan Academy is no physical headquarters. Its staff of almost 400 is distributed around the world, but top leaders come together in Mountain View, California every few months. Mr. Khan decided he would use the next gathering to engage everyone in a Socratic debate about the future. He asked OpenAI for 50 more logons, and as his team began using GPT-4, the room split between amazement and fury. Mr. Khan recalled, half the organization was like, "This is a game changer," Everything that we've ever been doing has been trying to scale personalization, mastery, learning, tutoring, engagement for students. This can do that. And then the other half of the organization said, hold on a second. GPT-4 was awful at math, inconsistent, and easily bullied by users into making right answers wrong. It also hallucinated, creating non-existent sources to support non-existent facts. And the Khan Academy team hadn't even started exploring the biases that may be loitering like unexploded ordnance inside the model's training data. The argument went on for hours and began to feel existential. Mr. Khan didn't doubt that Mr. Brockman had good intentions, but he wasn't naive. Although no money would exchange hands in this deal, he understood exactly what OpenAI stood to gain by aligning itself with the paragon of educational integrity. The field of educational technology is a graveyard of ventures that overpromised and underdelivered, like Summit Learning, Newton, and AltSchool. What OpenAI was asking of Khan Academy wasn't just a collaboration. It was a wager on untested technology and on Mr. Khan's reputation. This is my life's work, he said, and that introduces a whole other consideration of the stakes. Mr. Khan sensed that a majority of the room was aligning with his own position. AI and ChatGPT were going to be unstoppable forces. School systems wouldn't get to decide whether to use them. They'd have to. And they'd need an organization with the right ethics and expertise to help them navigate what was coming. I told the team, I think we're in a position to do it best, he said. Because we actually do care, right? Versus people who just pretend to. That conviction is rarer than it sounds. After years of reporting on AI, I decided to write a book about a certain kind of person I kept meeting. These characters weren't loud or profit-seeking, just stubborn. They had run into a meaningful problem in healthcare, government, or other industry and decided, against all available evidence, that AI might actually help. Progress was sometimes halting. AI is still weird, and human beings can even be weirder. But their efforts left me with an unfamiliar feeling, optimism. The most instructive example I found in education was the collaboration between OpenAI and Khan Academy. This was a shotgun wedding between two wildly unequal partners. One is a hyperscaling startup moving at a velocity most institutions can't track. The other is a relatively small and methodical education nonprofit. Together, they built Commigo, an AI tutor mimicking Mr. Khan's style of pedagogy that is now available, and in many cases free, for 2 million students, parents, and teachers. The New York Times has sued OpenAI and Microsoft, claiming copyright infringement of news content related to AI systems. The two companies have denied the suit's claims. The story of how they did it in a few frenzied months, how it nearly fell apart, and what they got right and wrong is about as close to a best-case scenario for AI in education as currently exists. And if organizations this thoughtful, this careful, and this well-resourced only barely pulled it off, that should tell you something about what to expect from everyone else. Shockingly informal. When two organizations collaborate on a new digital product, there's generally a series of rituals. The executives vow dedication to each other's success. The legal teams exchange partnership agreements. The engineers discuss code bases and security standards. OpenAI was moving with such speed and secrecy that there was none of that, just a Vegas-style corporate elopement, complicated by the fact that it was not a marriage of equals. Khan Academy was a lean operation with a clearly defined educational mission. It had one AI partner, OpenAI. OpenAI was a rocket ship aiming to build not just artificial intelligence, but also artificial general intelligence, a highly theoretical state of AI in which machines surpass human capability at just about everything. Its ambitions could not be explained neatly or achieved through corporate monogamy. Duolingo, Stripe, Morgan Stanley, and several other companies were also all working with OpenAI as part of its GPT-4 launch. There was only so much attention to go around. Literally, the product conversation was just, "Oh, let's start," Miss DeCerbo said. It was shockingly informal. Khan Academy knew so little about its partner that it initially shipped OpenAI as a large corpus of proprietary materials, math problems, history lessons, reading comprehension essays, thinking that they might be used to help train the model and improve its accuracy. OpenAI, yeah, thanks them. The GPT-4 had already been through years of training, and that phase of the process was over. They had moved on to fine-tuning the model, and ingesting new data wasn't an option. Other than connecting Khan Academy directly to GPT-4 using a few lines of code, there was almost no traditional engineering to be done. That was the first real understanding that we were in science fiction world, Mr. Khan said. From a coding perspective, there was very little work. Instead, Ms. DeCerbo, Mr. Khan, and their engineers spent several weeks as pioneers in a new coding language, English. Prompting is the standard way you interact with a language model. It means giving directions so the model knows what you want it to do or how you'd like it to behave. There's nothing technical about it. One of Mr. Khan's first prompts was, "Pretend you're a tutor. Here's a math problem a student is working on. What would you say to help them figure it out without giving away the answer?" What he wanted was a bot that could mimic the blend of knowledge, nuance, care, and enthusiasm he once put into tutoring his cousins, but for every child around the world. When I was tutoring, I didn't say, "You're wrong," or "You're right." I said, "That's not exactly what I got. How did you get your answer? Can you explain it?" When Khan Academy tried to teach GPT-4 how to recognize the right moment to give a hint or lead a student to the next step in reasoning with a probing question or encouragement, basically how to be Mr. Khan, things got messy. Language models are probabilistic, which means they perform a fresh calculation for every input. Even prompts with the same wording will generate various responses. A good Khan Academy system prompt couldn't simply be enshrined as successful. It needed to be iterated, tested, reworded, and tested again. As the number of prompts grew, so did the frustration of managing them. There was no way to keep track of the various versions or to know which ones were live in a given test environment. Also, GPT-4 was still an experiment, constantly being tuned on by OpenAI to reach goals that had nothing to do with Khan Academy. Each new update could, and often did, produce a fresh cascade of hallucinations and unpredictability, making the earlier progress obsolete. OpenAI promised that this was normal, that the model would get more stable as it got closer to its March 2023 release, but no one could say for sure when stability would arrive. Context stuffing. 5 months before the scheduled release of Khanmigo, nothing about the chatbot really worked. Perhaps feeling some guilt over its corporate promiscuity, OpenAI deployed a hyper-enthusiastic secret weapon, the solution strategist Jessica Shi. Solution strategist is OpenAI's term for an everything person. Account manager, technical solution architect, on-the-ground engineer for deployment and sales all rolled into one, Ms. Shi said giddily. She had already been working on GPT-4 launch products with a legal startup and a personnel assessment company, but for the chance to work with Mr. Khan, she was happy to bump her morning alarm an hour earlier to 4 a.m. "I watched Sal Khan's videos growing up," Ms. Shi said. "My family doesn't believe in movie theaters, but we do believe in the library. So when I got tapped on the shoulder, I was like, I cannot not do this. We are going to make this successful. This is Sal Khan." Her energy can obscure the fact that she is, as she said, just a very nice asshole trying to get things done. She grew up in Taipei, Taiwan, with a few early years in the United States when her father, a Taiwanese diplomat, was stationed in Washington. After college, Ms. Shi worked at Deloitte and McKinsey before landing at OpenAI. Her unique talent is helping people align their expectations about AI with what it can actually do for them, and sympathizing when things get weird. Ms. Shai quickly saw that the Khan Academy model wasn't close to its goal, scaling Sal Khan. "I know how Sal Khan sounds," she says. The model did not sound like Sal Khan. She also looked at what the educators were trying to achieve, some creative writing features, automating variations of existing math problems, and thought it was too basic. These were things that GPT 3.5 could do, she says, like "you gotta trust us." GPT-4 would be more than an incremental upgrade. We see glimpses of amazing intelligence. Think bigger. It's easier to think bigger when small things work, so Ms. Shai laid out a meeting schedule and started Khan Academy on a crash course in something called context stuffing. Rather than storing knowledge persistently, as search engines do, ChatGPT at the time started every interaction fresh with no memory of what had been said before. It didn't know a student's name or what had been covered in the previous tutoring session. It didn't even know it was supposed to act like a tutor. Context stuffing means surrounding the system prompt with all the detailed information ChatGPT needs to be effective. Imagine you're a teacher walking into a new classroom. The system prompt would be the equivalent of a job and temperament description. You're a math teacher. You're kind. You don't give away answers. You let students struggle productively. Context stuffing would be the stack of notes left on the desk. That's Anna. She's an 8th grade student working on linear equations aligned to Common Core state standards. She struggled with the concept of variables on both sides of the equation. Context stuffing isn't cheap. ChatGPT operates in a parallel financial universe where data is translated into a currency called tokens. When Khan Academy was first building Khanmigo, it used a version of ChatGPT-4 that allowed up to 8,192 tokens per interaction. In early 2023, OpenAI published pricing was 9 cents for 1,000 tokens of input, what a user sends to the model, and output, what the model sends back. It doesn't sound like much until you scale it. In the reputational exchange that OpenAI and Khan Academy had brokered, the latter got free access to the ChatGPT-4 model, but it did have to cover its ongoing computing costs. Later, when the program got larger, Microsoft would provide funding to allow K-12 teachers to access Khanmigo free. That means Khan Academy had a Goldilocks problem. If too little content made the product ineffective, too much would make it unaffordable. No one knew what was just right looked like. What was clear was that the context stuffing worked. The model started asking better questions, offering gentler but more productive nudges. Khan Academy saw glimmers of what it wanted to build, not a bot that knew math, but a bot that behaved like someone who knew how to teach it. Still, there were moments when the model forgot who it was or hallucinated with so much swagger that it took several steps before anyone noticed. The weird thing about the model is that you'll be disappointed for a long time until you're not, Ms. Shai said. I've seen that curve several times, and it's still surprising to me. The only thing she could do was plead with Khan Academy to trust her, which became a lot harder as November 30th, 2022. That morning, OpenAI released GPT 3.5 to the public without informing Khan Academy. Within 5 days, ChatGPT had more than 1 million users. Mr. Khan sent a Slack message to Mr. Brockman, who replied that OpenAI hadn't actually launched anything. It had merely put a chat interface in front of a model it had released 8 months earlier. This was technically true. It's also true that Mr. Altman's first tweet that day began, "Today we launched ChatGPT." Almost immediately, students started using ChatGPT to cheat on their homework, leading New York City and other school districts to ban it. "We're betting the org on this," Mr. Khan said, "and now the baby is getting thrown out with the bathwater." He was annoyed, which is about as hot as he runs. I asked Ms. DeCerbo if Khan Academy considered legal recourse, and she laughed. That implies there were other legal agreements. Aiming higher. It wasn't until December that engineers from OpenAI and Khan Academy all met in a room for the first time. Their goal was to red team Conmigo, an exercise with military and cybersecurity origins in which they all pretend to be hostile actors to uncover the system's vulnerabilities. In the context of a classroom chatbot, that meant they took on the personas of evil teens typing in the ugliest prompts imaginable. It's so uncomfortable, Ms. DeCerbo said. OpenAI already had standards for what GPT-4 could do or say. Khan Academy's rules would need to be stricter, zero profanity, and softer. Think about something like suicide, Ms. DeCerbo said. GPT knew enough to pivot away, but not in a constructive or empathetic way. Oh, that sounds like you're really struggling. Let's get back to math. No, she said, we can't do that. It should be trying to either offer a suicide prevention number or telling you to go talk to an adult guidance counselor instead of just trying to stop the conversation. For every human being that needed accounting for, there were equivalent number of sensitive curricular issues. Khan Academy has an excellent history program, every word of which is vetted, sourced, and updated to keep it from becoming a political tinderbox. But when one employee asked GPT-4 about the Trail of Tears, the bot, which remember was not trained on Khan Academy's fireproof materials, described Andrew Jackson's forced displacement of 60,000 Native Americans as government-sponsored hike. If good red teaming session surfaces all the ways in which AI lacks human judgment, it also offers a reminder that being human is often just a shared state of awkwardness. It ended up building a lot of trust, Ms. DeCerbo said, because we all sat around and said these horrible things. Ms. Shai has seen this phenomena before, and she used the looseness of the moment to press again for Khan Academy to raise its ambitions. But she wanted them to do so by focusing on the gradual accumulation of lots of small improvements that made the model more natural, more Saul-like. Intelligence is very nuanced, right? Like, what is truly the difference between a college student, a graduate student, and a PhD or a professor? It's not easy to explain, she said. It's this nuanced way they're able to extrapolate and then guide you through something. It's a combination of a lot of little behaviors, and GPT-4 is much more aligned to what the intent is. Nobody thought it was really possible to do true intelligence stuff, tutor-like behavior. That's what I mean about thinking bigger. To imagine that their clunky beta in a matter of weeks might effectively mimic Mr. Khan required a huge leap. Yet that's exactly what Ms. Shai asked for. For 5 days, she placed herself at the center of a team of Khan Academy engineers with a few OpenAI researchers on hand. Then on her mark, she asked everyone to pedal as fast as they could. If a prompt isn't working, give it to me, she told them. You work on something else. I'll adjust it. She demonstrated how to context stuff without overwhelming the model, how to write prompts that nudged instead of answered, and how to spot an adversarial input. Then she'd hand back a rough fix and trust the team to refine it based on their educational expertise. It's really almost like craftsmanship, Ms. Shai said. You show and then tell and then build. You guide them through it. By the end of the week, they'd built a Conmigo prototype. The name refers to the Spanish words amigo and comigo, or with me. I told Ms. Shai that I was afraid I'd miss something because I wasn't clear on exactly how all of that activity led to a better, more empathetic seeming product. She told me there was nothing to miss. There's no single moment when it all clicks. It just builds, trial by trial, failure by failure, until the model begins to understand more holistically what you want. Then suddenly, you're not explaining to ChatGPT anymore. You're riding it like a bicycle. This is one of the hardest things to reconcile about the current state of AI. The volume of computing power, the complexity of the transformer models, these may be beyond most people's mastery or interest, and we're used to that. We delegate computer science and trust that the math adds up. But for now, the AI math doesn't always add up, at least not in a way that's predictable or explainable. It still requires someone like Ms. Shai to stand in the middle of the scrum, pleading with everyone to believe. With a working prototype in place, Khan Academy's engineers began adding a front end and new tools. To address the panic about cheating, they built a chat history that allowed parents and teachers to search for evidence of plagiarism or bad behavior. They come up with a feature where students could talk to historical figures and then created rules, must not be genocidal maniac, to ensure that the figure wasn't Hitler. Launch day for GPT-4 and Kamigo was set for March 14, 2023, a Tuesday. This is a story that I don't really like to tell a lot of people, Ms. Shai said, but 72 hours before launch, we still didn't have a model that they were satisfied with. As she frantically relayed Khan Academy's feedback to OpenAI researchers, her anxiety spiked with every vibration of her phone. They're texting, "Jessica, it's Friday. Do you have an updated model yet? Saturday. Do you have an updated model yet?" I was so nervous, right until delivery. Kamigo launched. Watching its introduction in classrooms in New Jersey and Indiana, I saw that some students immediately found it helpful. Others lost interest upon discovering it would not simply hand over the answers. Teachers tended to be more inspired users, and over time, Khan Academy shifted its engineering focus to add more than 30 new features for them. A reminder that AI, like most of the technology that's preceded it, is rarely used the way you expect it to be. A year after the release, Mr. Khan was hardly euphoric. "We need to be realistic that there's no simple answer for student engagement," he told me. Even as Khan Academy touts a 731% increase in Kamigo's reach year over year, Ms. DeCerbo has been bracing. "So far, I'm not seeing the revolution in education," she said. Kamigo remains Khan Academy's major AI commitment, but the organization has also begun developing other products, including Writing Coach, a tool that helps students outline, draft, and revise essays to complete its core offerings from before the AI era. These are not admissions of failure, just recognition that there's a vast difference between a product release and a transformation. Everyone is fanatically impatient to know how AI story ends, eager for gains large enough to offset their anxieties. But progress in education arrives slowly, unevenly distributed, heavily resisted, and tangled up with ordinary human behavior. Kamigo exists now as a reflection of the process through which it was born, imperfect, improving, and desperately in need of thoughtful humans to help it succeed. 3.8%, the rise in consumer prices in April from a year earlier. With energy prices rising rapidly because of the war in Iran, life has become more expensive for Americans. The Consumer Price Index rose in April by 3.8% from a year earlier, a jump from a 2.4% annual rate in February before the war began. The rise was nearly triple what forecasters had anticipated and was the fastest rate increase since May of 2023, the Labor Department reported on Tuesday. Energy prices rose 3.8% from the month before and nearly 18% from a year earlier, driving inflation overall. But the increase wasn't limited to volatile energy costs. The core index, which excludes food and energy prices, was 2.8% higher in April than the year before. And the producer price index, which measures what businesses pay for goods and services, rose 6% in April from a year earlier and was up 1.4% from March, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on Wednesday. It was the fastest single-month increase since March 2022. The wholesale cost measure, while less well known than the consumer index, can offer economists early signals of how costs are making their way through the supply chain. The spike in inflation will make rate cuts by the Federal Reserve harder to justify, just as Kevin Warsh, President Trump's pick to replace Jerome H. Powell as Fed chair, steps into his new role. Economic sentiment is at a record low, according to the University of Michigan's survey of consumers. I'm looking for anything where I can say, here's some relief, and that's not very easy to do in this report, Michael Reed, chief U.S. economist at RBC Capital Markets, told the New York Times' Lydia DePillis about Consumer Price Report. Generally, inflation is moving in the wrong direction. Celebrities are in and sales are up, by Richard Dixon. Looking back to an emotional connection to the brand, the former Mattel executive has drawn inspiration from the clothing retailer's early days. At Gap's headquarters in San Francisco, an archive dedicated to the apparel company's 57-year history features nearly 6,000 boxes of memorabilia documenting the retailer's brands, which also include Old Navy, Banana Republic, and Athleta. There are prints from photographers like Annie Leibovitz and material related to many celebrity ad campaigns like Missy Elliott and Madonna for Gap and Cindy Crawford for Old Navy. Those dated back to the retailer's heyday when malls were full, celebrities wore the brand on red carpets, and Gap stores were plot points in sitcoms like Seinfeld. When Richard Dixon started as Gap's chief executive nearly 3 years ago, he was awed by those archives and set out to change the conversation about the company. Gap had spent years closing hundreds of stores across the United States as sales flagged and profits were patchy. Its stock, which peaked in 2000, was languishing. The company took more than a year to fill the CEO position. Mr. Dixon, who spent nearly 20 years at Mattel, brought with him a playbook that helped revitalize the toy maker's brands like Hot Wheels and Barbie. He got Barbie to the big screen with star power and marketing machine that had produced blockbuster financial results. The native New Yorker speaks excitedly about the ways that fashion, entertainment, and music are intertwined. He went to Coachella last month and has been to the Oscars in recent years. He often mentions how Gap's first store, which opened in 1969 in San Francisco, sold records, tapes, and jeans. Mr. Dixon's culture-focused strategy is taking root. For his creative director, he hired Zach Posen, who dressed Kendall Jenner in a Gap gown for the recent Met Gala. Gap has made toe-tapping ads featuring Cat's Eye and Parker Posey. Mr. Dixon even hired another CEO, a chief entertainment officer, to oversee the company's push into content, licensing, and Hollywood. Gap's comparable sales have risen for 8 straight quarters, and its market value has increased to $8.5 billion from $3.6 billion when Mr. Dixon started. Last year, Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic posted sales increases, with only Athleta recording a decline. Gap's namesake brand showed the strongest growth. Mr. Dixon, 58, credits the turnaround to being aware of pop culture, content, art, theater, music, entertainment. If a brand makes sure that those themes come through, you'll be more relevant, he said. This interview was edited and condensed. As you try to bring Gap back into the cultural conversation, how are you managing your time? Are you spending more time in Hollywood? As our business evolves, my allocated time also changes. When I first got to the company, we were in fix mode. It's no secret. My time was 100% spent on operations, the financial rigor, setting up strategic priorities, and editing a lot of the noise in the system that can be very distracting for a turnaround. Over the course of 3 years, we've emerged a better company. Now we move into the next phase, which is to build momentum. My focus, while not taking my eye off the operational discipline, moves more into how to accelerate our growth. I have a multitude of meetings and time spent with the entertainment community, which I'm very familiar with from previous roles. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. When you were hired from Mattel, the chatter was that you would try and recreate the Barbie magic. Is that true, or is there a different strategy for the Gap? It's actually the same playbook. It's not so much that the playbook is unique, it's the methodology and the execution that's unique. The playbook is first identifying what our reason for being. You could put me on any brand in the world. Why do you exist? What is your purpose? What is our point of difference? Those simple questions have very complicated answers when you're in turnaround. If you can't answer it in a sentence or two, or 1 or 2 words, you've got a problem. Old Navy is different from Gap. Gap is different from Banana. Banana is different from Athleta. So let's focus on Gap. What makes it distinctive? When I look at the history of every one of our brands, it wasn't dissimilar to the Barbie conversation. What was it that broke through? What was the single thing that made it so incredibly relevant? In our case, it was a store that was all-inclusive before inclusivity became a word, because we sold jeans for all races, all sizes, all sexes. We bridged the generation gap in the experience through music. Music was the connective tissue in the context of the store experience. Let's get back to the music narrative with great product storytelling and amplify it in a way that is relevant for today's consumer. We started with Jungle with our linen campaign. We moved to Troye Sivan with great music video around the baggy and loose trend. Then, of course, the blowout with Cat's Eye. These aren't ads. Yes, you see the fleece because it looks incredible, but nobody's saying, oh my God, it's a great deal with a great price. They're saying, did you see this? Did you feel this? That is when you get emotional connection to a brand. We had become more about price than product, more about stuff, not storytelling. If you're focusing on entertainment, how do you measure success? We have dashboards everywhere. I think we just turned one off when you walked in because our business flashes on an hourly basis on my screens. We have dashboards that measure brand love, people searching more for our brand, and brand attributes that we test and roll out to see how consumers are feeling. Does the focus on entertainment hedge against all the uncertainty in the world? To some extent, in the world we live in, we should be that great distraction in some cases, that pleasant place that you love to go. That ultimately makes a brand stronger to essentially navigate more complex times. There's always something that we have to worry about. How worried are you about the consumer spending? We're in California right now, and I passed a gas station where it was about $6 per gallon. That was a good deal. Most retailers say that consumers remain resilient, but are you preparing for spending levels to drop? We have a fantastic portfolio that addresses all income cohorts. We have quality products that should last, in some cases for generations. You're buying it for the long haul, but we do recognize that we need frequency. We need to stay fresh, we need to stay new. There are a lot of businesses that will start to pull back on quality, right? We're not. You're from New York City, right? Tell me about your upbringing. Both my parents were in retail, real estate, and fashion. My mom was more on the creative side, and my dad was more on the financial and operations side. My grandparents were also in fashion and retail. They were Holocaust survivors. My grandmother sewed and had her own line in department stores. My grandfather ran a factory, so they had a small business that did very well. I remember growing up and running around the factory floor. What's the piece of advice that you received that you still reflect on today? Retail is detail. There's not a single day where everything goes right, but at the end of the day, you could still say that it was a great day. Ultimately, you're firefighting on a minute-to-minute basis. You're constantly in motion. That sense of detail orientation is probably an attribute that's carried on with me from my earliest days in the industry. Strategies by Jeff Sommer. AI, oil, and chips are driving global markets. Diversified funds are now hard to find, and geopolitics and war are looming disruptors. Artificial intelligence has been propelling financial markets around the world this year, but not the stocks that you may have expected. True, NVIDIA, the world's most valuable publicly traded company, returned more than 21,000% over the last decade, according to FactSet. But it isn't the hottest chip maker in 2026. That distinction belongs to an unlikely company, Intel. Only a year ago, Intel needed a bailout by the U.S. government. Yet, it has made a remarkable comeback. In April alone, its shares soared 114%. For 2026, Intel is up 194.5%, more than 9 times as much as NVIDIA returned. Like the fluctuating price of oil and the war in the Persian Gulf, AI is moving markets, creating immense levels of stock concentration, not just in the United States, but nearly everywhere. What's different now is that AI halo is covering over some different companies. Instead of NVIDIA, which makes chips critical for the training or development of AI models, there has been a run-up to share prices for companies whose semiconductors enable inference, the answers given by AI agents to user queries. Intel fits that category, and so do other companies in a multitude of places. For example, the stock markets in South Korea and Taiwan have been among the best on the planet this year, thanks to chip makers led by Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix in South Korea, and perhaps the most important, by Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. A Taiwan factory churns out highly advanced chips based on the designs of a host of other companies, including NVIDIA. Chips in emerging markets. Thanks to chip companies like these, investors in emerging markets are experiencing a boom year. Consider the MSCI Emerging Markets Index. It is perhaps the most widely followed measure of emerging market stocks, and it is up 18.8% in 2026, compared with 9.6% for the S&P 500 and 6% for Round Hill Magnificent 7 ETF. The fund's holdings comprise Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla, all of which have benefited from the AI frenzy. That's true for emerging markets too, but partly for an idiosyncratic reason. The way the widely followed emerging markets index is constructed. MSCI restricts the weight of Chinese companies to 23% and defines Taiwan and South Korea as emerging markets. Those two technologically advanced economies have a combined weight in the index of 43.7%, compared with 23% for China and about 12% for India. As a result, TSMC, Samsung Electronics, and SK Hynix are the three largest components of the MSCI Emerging Markets Index. A broad bet on emerging markets right now, using that benchmark, is as much a bet on AI as an investment in the tech-heavy S&P 500. That's heightening a major dilemma. The ascendancy of the Magnificent Seven stocks and other tech companies has made the U.S. stock market so highly concentrated that even the most comprehensive U.S. stock index funds are no longer well diversified, as I pointed out in January. The rising share prices of chip companies show that the problem extends way beyond the U.S. stock market. Take emerging market stocks. They are widely thought to operate in a different dimension from the so-called advanced or developed markets, like those in the United States, Western Europe, and Japan. That is still broadly true in the 1970s, when I was a student in Taiwan, and to a lesser extent in the 1980s and 1990s, when I reported from places like Beijing, Manila, Ho Chi Minh City, and New Delhi. Today, though, true diversification is harder to find. Some stock markets aren't dominated by AI and chip companies, along with South Korea's Kospi Index and Taiwan's TAIEX Index, the GSE Composite Index in Ghana, and the NGX All Shares Index in Nigeria are among the top 5 global performers this year, according to Bloomberg. But both Nigeria and, to a smaller degree, Ghana are oil producers, distributors, and refiners. So they are profiting from the rising world oil prices set off by the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, as much as U.S. fossil fuel companies are. Seplat Energy in Nigeria and Ghana Oil have had strong performances, and so have the companies in the S&P 500 Energy section, which leads the overall S&P 500. Valero Energy, a refiner, and Halliburton, an energy services company, are American S&P 500 companies whose investors are reaping profits because of the soaring oil prices. Whether it's because of AI or oil, no stock market is an island. View from Philadelphia. In fact, what's moving world markets to a remarkable degree are semiconductor companies, many of them tracked by Venerable Index from Philadelphia, home of the oldest stock exchange in the United States. The Philadelphia Stock Exchange merged with the NASDAQ in 2007 and is a shadow of its former self. But its Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, known as the SOX Index, continues. It has been transformed into a global index. Top stocks include Intel, NVIDIA, ASML, the Dutch company that makes the machines needed to etch circuits for the smallest and most cutting-edge chips, and TSMC. With Intel at the head of the pack, the global chip companies in that index have risen 63.6% this year. Back in the dot-com era of the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Philadelphia SOX Index had a similarly breathtaking ascent, and it made frequent headlines. Its giddy ride this year is reminiscent of that era's experience, which ended badly, as Bespoke Investment Group pointed out last week. The last time the SOX outperformed the S&P 500, this was much in 2000, Bespoke said in a note to clients. Michael Burry, the hedge fund manager profiled in the movie The Big Short, made a similar observation, but took it much further, warning that AI has bewitched the entire stock market. We are once again in a tech bubble, he added, and it will surely burst. This time, it's a closely linked global stock market. I'm not in the forecasting game and remain invested in global stocks through index funds, but I'm nervous too. The Taiwan Strait. I have another reason for concern. Much as the Strait of Hormuz has become a strategic choke point for the world's oil supply, the Taiwan Strait has an outsized economic importance for silicon chips because Taiwan is home to a vital company, TSMC. The meetings that accompanied the U.S.-Chinese summit meeting in Beijing included discussions on the future of Taiwan, as much sessions always do. China claims Taiwan as an inalienable offshore part of China and says that there will be reunification eventually, one way or another. On the other hand, the official U.S. policy is a posture of strategic ambiguity, as it has been since the Shanghai Communique of 1972. There has been an uneasy peace, allowing the semiconductor industry to cluster there and form a silicon shield. That has helped to protect Taiwan because the silicon chips produced there have been so crucial for the world economy. In Beijing on Thursday, President Xi Jinping of China warned President Trump that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations, according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Secretary of State Marco Rubio later said that U.S. policy on Taiwan was unchanged. The status quo is what global markets prefer. Political tremors in East Asia could upset the markets as much as the disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz have. You can invest far and wide in today's world, but you can't leave geopolitics behind. Chips, AI, and oil dominate the world's stock markets just about everywhere you go. Battle to Make AI Safer is testing a new legal strategy by Kashmir Hill. Sam Nelson began using ChatGPT when he was in high school senior to answer random questions and help with his homework. During his freshman year at the University of California, Merced in 2023, he also started querying the chat box about how to use illicit drugs safely. At first, ChatGPT responded that it couldn't answer such questions and advised Mr. Nelson to seek help from a medical professional. But over time, it became more willing to engage. By Mr. Nelson's sophomore year, ChatGPT was telling him about dosages for his weight and how he could achieve the drug's desired effects. It was even encouraging at times, offering tips on his audio setup for maximum out-of-body disassociation. On the last night of his life, around 3 a.m., Mr. Nelson had been drinking and had taken a high dose of an herbal supplement called Kratom. He told ChatGPT how many grams he'd consumed, and ChatGPT explained the effects he should expect. Mr. Nelson asked if Xanax could alleviate nausea. "Be careful," ChatGPT responded. It said that mixing Xanax and Kratom might be unsafe, but it offered a recommended dose. If you're going to do it anyway, Mr. Nelson's mother, Layla Turner Scott, found his body later that day. Ms. Turner Scott initially blamed the drugs for his death, which came in May of 2025. Then she discovered the detailed advice that ChatGPT had given him on how to use them. This robot is becoming his drug buddy, Ms. Turner Scott said. I'm reading this and I'm like, is this real? The New York Times sued OpenAI in 2023, accusing it of copyright infringement. The company has denied those claims. She told her son's story to journalists at the SF Gate, hoping that it would teach people about the dangers of relying on chatbots for medical information and alert ChatGPT's owner, OpenAI, that its safeguards weren't working. Soon after Ms. Turner Scott received a message from Mitali Jain, a lawyer who runs a nonprofit called Tech Justice Law. More than a year earlier, Ms. Jain had helped bring the first lawsuit against a chatbot company over a user's death. A 14-year-old in Florida named Sewell Setzer III had died by suicide after becoming obsessed with a chatbot imitating a Game of Thrones character on a service called Character AI. The case ended in a settlement, opening the door to the idea that chatbot companies could be held liable for the effects their creations had on users. Ms. Turner Scott and her husband, Angus Scott, were initially reluctant to sue OpenAI over their son's death. "I'm a lawyer, and I know a lot of times with lawsuits it's just the lawyers who win," Ms. Turner Scott said. Ms. Jane told the couple that during the time their son was using ChatGPT, OpenAI had made the chatbot more engaging and less likely to comply with its own safety guidelines. She also told them that OpenAI had just announced a new service called ChatGPT Health. Some 230 million people were already asking ChatGPT health and wellness questions each week, and the new tool would allow them to upload their medical records, lab results, and fitness information for analysis and personalized advice. Going public with Mr. Nelson's story hadn't caused the company to change course, Ms. Jane told them, but suing could. After the Setzer litigation, Character AI had made changes to its safety practices and barred children from using its chatbots. Last week, the Scotts filed a lawsuit against OpenAI in state court in California, alleging wrongful death and the unauthorized practice of medicine. The Scotts are asking for financial damages and for the court to pause the operation of ChatGPT Health. It joins more than 24 open lawsuits that have been brought against OpenAI and other chatbot makers in the past year, and half seeking to hold them responsible for conversations allegedly linked to harmful outcomes, from suicides, mental breakdowns, to instances of stalking and mass shootings. Ms. Jane, a human rights lawyer turned technology critic, has been involved in nearly half of those lawsuits. In her view, AI companies are making products that harm people, and various attempts to rein them in with bad publicity or with new laws that mandate safeguards and protections for users have not worked well enough. The battleground to make them safer is now in the courts, she said. "This is a well-trodden path in consumer law," said Alexandra Lahav, a professor at Cornell University and the author of In Praise of Litigation. "The American political system favors releasing new products and figuring out how to regulate them later," she said. "We really privilege innovation and then sort of deal with whatever the fallout is on the back end," Ms. Lahav said. "What you're seeing in these lawsuits is that back end." What is novel about the technology itself? Are chatbots like books, which are generally not subject to consumer protection laws, or are they more like blenders, which manufacturers need to ensure are safe? What makes these cases really difficult is that they're on the line between speech and a product, Ms. Lahav said. If you interact with a chatbot and it leads to real-world harms, is that on you or is that on the company? Product liability cases. Ms. Jane's nonprofit has become a kind of clearinghouse for people who feel victimized by chatbots. Ever since she filed the high-profile suit against Character AI, she said she has received hundreds of messages from people about chatbot conversations gone wrong. When Ms. Jane founded Tech Justice Law in late 2023, it was a one-woman outfit, and she planned to do mostly strategic work, coordinating legal workshops and organizing amicus briefs that might sway judges' rulings. But it was hard to resist getting directly involved in the cases coming her way, and she decided to team up with a larger, more experienced plaintiffs firm, the Social Media Victims Law Center, which has, in recent years, brought hundreds of lawsuits against Facebook, Google, and others, claiming their social media services are addictive to children. She also filed a lawsuit with Edelson, a firm that has been suing technology companies over privacy violations since the early 2000s. The relationship with Edelson soured, and the firm went on to file other chatbot cases without Ms. Jane. The growing number of product liability cases that have been filed against OpenAI in the past year use arguments similar to those deployed against automakers and big tobacco in the past, that it has designed a dangerous product, did not perform adequate safety testing, and failed to warn consumers about the risks. They focus on specific version of the chatbot to which some users form deep emotional attachments. GPT 4o, which was released in May of 2024 and retired in February of 2026. It was a notably anthropomorphic model known for a tendency to flatter users. The lawsuits claim that GPT 4o encouraged suicidal ideation, endorsed fanciful or paranoid ideas that caused people to lose touch with reality, assisted plans for mass shootings in Canada and Florida, and generally gave people unsound and harmful advice that led to dire outcomes. Most of the cases have been consolidated in California State Court under the heading ChatGPT product liability cases. AI has nothing to do with tobacco, and an algorithm has nothing to do with the way a cigarette is designed, but the law is built by analogy, said Ten Merman, executive director of the Center for Consumer Law and Economic Justice at the University of California, Berkeley. What the plaintiffs' firms are doing is utilizing well-established legal principles in a new product area. The Scotts, for example, claim that OpenAI rushed out ChatGPT 4o without proper safety testing, with design defects such as the sycophantic endorsement of users' bad ideas that caused a foreseeable harm to their son. An OpenAI spokesman, Drew Pusateri, wrote in a statement to the New York Times, "These interactions took place on an earlier version of ChatGPT that is no longer available. ChatGPT is not a substitute for medical or mental health care, and we have continued to strengthen how it responds in sensitive and acute situations with input from mental health experts. The safeguards in ChatGPT today are designed to identify distress, safely handle harmful requests, and guide users to real-world help. This work is ongoing, and we continue to improve it in close consultation with clinicians." So far, OpenAI has filed only one legal response to the wave of lawsuits, in a case brought by the parents of Adam Rain, a 16-year-old who died by suicide after discussing it extensively with ChatGPT. The company said that its technology had not caused the tragedy, that it was a service and not a product subject to such liability laws, and the Rains' demands that the chatbot not discuss self-harm would violate the First Amendment. Eric Goldman, a technology law professor at Santa Clara University, said the company's claims had merit. Most of the cases against OpenAI are claiming complex psychological effects that the chatbot had on people. Trying to reverse engineer a single cause is not possible in most cases, he said. Mr. Goldman said the algorithms behind the chatbots were offering information and expressive ideas and should be seen as a form of constitutionally protected speech. It's not the chatbots themselves that speech is protected, he said, but the humans behind them, as if the chatbots are books and their engineers are the authors. There's a set of decision makers at every chatbot company that make the bunch of choices about what gets indexed, how to manage the index, and what gets output, he said. And those are humans are doing the same kind of things that humans do with other publishers. Slowing down the AI race. The Scotts say their lawsuit is meant to get justice for their son, but also to get AI companies to slow down and be more careful in the health space. After seeing how dependent their son became on ChatGPT's medical advice, they said they found it terrifying that OpenAI is now offering a dedicated service for health analysis. Medical experts have also raised concerns about ChatGPT Health. In February, writing in the journal Nature, doctors at Mount Sinai said they presented the service with 60 realistic patient scenarios and found that it failed to recognize a medical emergency more than half the time. OpenAI spokesman said that the study's methodology was flawed and that ChatGPT Health was being slowly rolled out to users as the company continued to improve with feedback from physicians. If you're using this as an emergent situation, you should use a lot of caution, said Girish Nadakarni, the chief AI officer of the Mount Sinai Health System and one of the study's authors. Dr. Nakarni said AI companies offering services like ChatGPT Health should put them through real-life tests and have them assessed by independent experts. He said a doctor reviewing Sam Nelson's symptoms would have told him to go to an emergency room. People's lives are being upended by this technology, Ms. Jane said. The original sin is allowing these companies to launch these products without proper safety testing and oversight. She now employs 4 lawyers. The inbound messages about victims keep coming, she said, and so will more lawsuits. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 17th, 2026 issue of the New York Times Business section. We read from the New York Times Business section every Thursday at 11 a.m. Your reader has been Jean, and thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 14 of Ira Gershwin by Michael Owen. Stay with us for these readings and more.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have